So, as we all know, MX Bikes has some very interesting characteristics that sometimes we love, sometimes we hate. Currently in the game, we have these very interesting front end slash slow speed physics where the bike just gets all kinds of wonky for seemingly no reason. Now, in game, it is possible to adjust your rider's weight. You just have to do it in the background in all of the files. And the rider is currently set up to be 80 kg, which at 5'7", I believe that he is as well, isn't the most athletic of builds that I've ever seen or heard of. So L21, who is part of the OEM team and one of the MX Bikes mods, sent me the idea of just adjusting the weight and kind of seeing what I think. So what we're going to do in this video is go to the extreme end. So I'm going to make my rider essentially mini-me and then all the way up to the big show, and then we're going to try and find a nice middle ground, see how it affects the bike's handling. I actually found some very interesting things throughout this video, so you are going to want to pay attention to the end because it comes to an interesting conclusion as well. So I hope you enjoy, and let me know your thoughts down below. Also, disclaimer, I will not be showing you how to do this. Although it doesn't work online, as you can see, you get a rider data mismatch. I don't want people going and cheating for world records anytime soon. We already have to worry about tyre mods being used, and I don't want people changing their rider weight. So I apologise, but it's just for research purposes and experimenting. So enjoy the video. So for this, let's call it experiment or test, whichever you want to do, I was originally going to use the MXGP of Sardinia only, because I thought it's quite a rough track. It's a fast sand track with lots of bumps and rollers everywhere. It's a track that really kind of pushes the bike, and you have to be pretty perfect in a lot of sections for the bike to go through it the way that it's intended, rather than it getting a bit funky. Now, as soon as I loaded into it on 50 kg rider weight, the bike instantly felt a lot bouncier and a lot faster as well. And throughout the course of the first lap around Sardinia, I was kind of jumping things further than I normally would, or I also found that the gyroscopic effect of the bike, so whether you brake or accelerate in the air, also seemed a lot more prevalent. It was a lot stronger. So if I accelerated how I normally would, the front end would come up a lot higher, which would sometimes result in me just getting a bit too far off the back of the bike. But there was definitely something there that made me feel like if you got this dialed, you could go a lot faster than normal. The only difficulty with this is I've done all of these tests on the same suspension as I always run. By the way, there was no kind of testing here and there, just to see how the bike fully handles differently. But I think what actually slows you down when your rider is this light is you spend more time in the air than you do moving forwards, because your suspension is so springy, your rider's so light. You're always above the ground rather than on it, kind of moving forwards. So what I thought from this is if I essentially can jump further or jump higher, maybe Supercross will be a bit easier. So I decided that on both, well, on every single weight that I do now, we're going to do a lap on Sardinia and a lap on the round 14 of the ARL Supercross Championship, which is at East Rutherford, and I think it makes for some very, very interesting results. Now, the reason that I chose East Rutherford for the Supercross track is there's a couple of jumps in here which, on race night, you really had to be perfect to be able to clear normally, like quadding. However, as soon as I hopped on it on the 50 kilogram rider weight, it just seems so much easier. It feels like there's a lot more traction when you're that light, which is odd. I feel like if you're heavier, it would give you more traction, so that was a bit counterintuitive. The gyro was still very, very strong, so I feel like the seat bouncing was made a bit better. I feel like you fly through the air a little bit more. You kind of, I don't know, just like levitate through the air easier than you would normally. And I could find that I didn't have to land a jump absolutely perfectly to then also clear the jump afterwards. So to make your rider that light in Supercross actually seemed to be a bit beneficial. The only point where it really hindered me was through the whoop section. I could not get through the whoops to save my life. I'd get through the first 2 or 3 absolutely fine, and then that springiness really kind of kicked me in the arse, so to speak. It would just send me over the bars or all kinds of sketchy, and if it wasn't for that, I would say that we need 50 kilogram rider weight, as unrealistic as it sounds, all the time, because it was so much fun. It made Supercross so much easier than usual. But yeah, I just could not get through them whoops whatsoever. Maybe it's something that can be fixed with suspension changes, but you'll see later in the video that different weights have a different effect when it comes to those whoops right there. So next up, we made him 50 kg. Now, Our boy's been enjoying one too many Happy Meals. He is a big boy now. We went up to 110 kg, so I went down by 30 originally. We went up by 30 from default this time, and it's night and day difference between the two. It's actually unreal. So starting off, as soon as I spawned in on Sardinia, I felt so sluggish. Like, I didn't change the gearing or anything like that. As I said, the suspension and the entire setup was exactly the same. But usually where I feel like I'd be revving out in second or third gear, on a 450 as well, it was just bogging everywhere. It felt so much slower. So not only did it feel very sluggish in the turns, oddly enough, whilst being sluggish, the traction also felt worse, which was a really weird combination. So then I felt like I was having to be really, really smooth on the throttle to try and not slide out, which then made the bogging even worse, which then meant I couldn't clear the same jumps as always, and it was just like, it just kind of snowballed into something that I really, really didn't enjoy. There was just a massive lack of momentum around the track overall, which on a track like Sardinia is really, really important to make sure that you're actually going fast around the entire track and flowing and going apex to apex. The front end felt a little bit more twitchy in some places that the lighter rider weight didn't, which I'm guessing might just be due to because it's so heavy, there's so much force trying to go through the front end, and it's just kind of emphasising those funky front end physics that we already have. I didn't really find too much positive other than the fact that it seemed to soak up the normal bumps, like standard braking bumps, really, really well. Big sand rollers was a no-go, but the normal small choppy braking bumps, it actually handled quite well. So then I thought, well, you know what, if 50 kg is worked really well on Supercross everywhere except the whoops, but 110 kg handles bumps really good, how does 110 kg handle whip sections? And this really, really shocked me. I don't think I've had an experience on this game quite as painful as trying to ride Supercross at 110 kg. It is disgusting, near impossible, I might say. So when you go on a track like East Rutherford, where you already have to be pretty perfect in the rhythms to hit the big lines, then you go and slap another 30 kg of body weight on, which makes the bike bog and be really slippery in the corners, it's a recipe for disaster. It was horrendous. I couldn't clear any of the rhythm sections. Even if I downsided a jump before absolutely perfectly, I still had to stretch the life out of it just to hit a normal triple. The Supercross triple on this track, really, really simple jump, you know, it was a nice long run up before it. I've actually struggled with overjumping it a few times. I had to stretch it out every single time on 110 kg and didn't even make it one time, which is pretty gross. However, completely opposite to the 50 kg, this setup absolutely munches the whoops, which is really frustrating because they're both so polar opposites. It's unreal. The 50 kg worked perfectly everywhere on Supercross except the whoops, and the 110 kg is an absolute nightmare except for the whoops. So, and annoyingly so far, it seems like the middle ground of 80 kg, which is the stock and the default, is the way to go. However, I didn't want to stop quite there. I thought there's got to be a sweet spot somewhere, kind of give or take one way. So we're going to carry on again. So instead of going to the extreme of 50 or 110, we're going to go 10 out from default. So we're going to go 70 kg, which is 10 below stock, and we're going to go for 90 kg after that, which is 10 above stock, and see how they feel. There should be more minute differences, but hopefully maybe something that could be better overall. Now, L21, who suggested this to me in the first place, did mention that apparently 70 kg has been reported to be the one that feels best in the game, that eliminates a lot of those low speed / front end physics without kind of going too far to the one extreme or the other. Now, I did notice a kind of similarness to 50 kg originally, where the bumps felt a little bit bouncier. You know, on Sardinia, I feel like I would still struggle to keep that momentum going forwards as much as it was going upwards. So that was a little bit of an L in that regard. However, the turning felt incredible. Like the grip was really, really, really good. And I feel like you could push quite hard in the corners without it punishing you. Which, especially on a track like sand, it's very hard to replicate sand in-game. Because IRL, sand's always moving underneath you. You can be quite aggressive on the throttle, and depending on like your leaning, you can track for it pretty damn good. But we don't get that kind of dirt simulation in the game. We just get like a traction value, and that's really it. So it's hard to replicate. But I feel like the 70 kg did do a good job of making me feel fairly planted So that is a W. But I still found that, I mean, it can always be changed with suspension settings and such, but that wasn't the point of this experiment at all. I still felt like it was a little bit too bouncy. The bike definitely felt more nimble, which sometimes can get you in trouble, because it makes the steering a bit more sensitive, and that in turn could lead to some crashes. But I think once you get used to it, it's honestly absolutely fine. But the key thing from this, which I was so shocked by, happens in the Supercross. So, as a big old Supercross slut, I was very hopeful for this, and I was actually blown away. I think that's the best way of putting it. It felt so good everywhere, again, except for the whoops. That is the one downside to this entire thing. I could get through them, don't get me wrong, but it was very messy. Now, my qualifying time for the aerial race was like a mid-54, something along them lines. And within the 3 laps of me riding on 70 kg on here, I managed to get a 54.4, which might have been better, or not, I have no idea. But for me, that is a super good lap. The lines that are usually difficult to get over, no troubles at all, just floated over nice and easy. What really shocked me is how aggressive you could be in the corners, both under braking and under acceleration, and how tight you can turn as well. The grip felt unlimited. It reminded me literally of like Beta 16 days, and we all know how overpowered the traction was back then. It was insane. So 70 kg in Supercross, I absolutely love. I just wish that it was a bit better in the whoops, which, as I've said before, like throughout this video, can be changed with suspension. So we'll take that with a little bit of a pinch of salt, but this so far felt the best by a long shot. However, just in Supercross, outdoors it still felt a little bit bouncy through the rollers and such. So I'd probably still prefer to stick with the stock 80 outdoors, but 70 indoors, absolutely incredible. But then the last thing we also to do on this was to test 90 and go a little bit higher than stock and see how that copes with the outdoors and the indoors. So 90 kg was a bit of an iffy one for me. It was kind of mixed across the board on things that it done well versus things that it didn't. It absorbed bumps actually really well outdoors. More so like the little choppy ones. The rollers, it was still a bit meh on. I didn't really rate it too much. However, it did still suffer from the same things that the 110 did, where it felt a lot slipperier on the back end, which then caused me to try and tiptoe through corners a bit more, which again just kind of cycled into a lack of momentum around the track and lack of being able to double or triple through rollers. It felt a little bit heavier in the air, which I'm not necessarily against. I think it depends on what sort of rider you are and how you like to play the game. If you're someone that likes to get literally backwards off of every jump and scrub super low, then you won't enjoy it. But if you are a much more precise player and you like taking your time and hitting things really smoothly, then it can be a massive W. I think it just felt a bit sluggish, but the bike's handling itself felt really good. It then just becomes, it ends up being a debate on, do you prefer smoothness over bumps, over traction in corners, and I just think it's one of them arguments that you're never going to win. So I wouldn't really recommend it going up to 90 at all at any point. I thought I would try it on Supercross just to give it the benefit of the doubt, and I mean, here's how it went. You can see in the background. As you can imagine, it was sluggish but not unbearable. Had to take my time a little bit more in the bowl turns to make sure that I didn't slide out at all. And then the jumps that I was just absolutely breezing over on, say, 70 kg were a bit of a stretch, but they weren't unclearable. I think there's a very fine line when you get like between the 80 and 90 range on what feels smooth and planted versus what slides out and then turns into it being too boggy and not being able to jump anything. So it hits the whoops really well again, same as 110 did. Like, I absolutely love it in the whoops. A bit slipperier on the rear than like the 70s and the 50s, and just a bit heavier in the air. But again, I'm not against that. I could still bring the whoops back. It's not like I was just sending it sideways and then I was just hung out to dry and I just end up crashing. But again, I wouldn't recommend it. So then after all of that testing, what does it really leave us with? What's the conclusion or end result? And to break it down quickly, I kind of wrote notes as we went. So 50 kg for me, the gyro felt very strong, so accelerating or braking in the air made the bike move a lot more. Whoops were an absolute nightmare. The bike feels extremely bouncy, but you do have more grip in corners and the more freedom in the air. The whip seems to come back a lot quicker. At the other extreme end, 110 kg, the bike was very, very sluggish. It was bogging everywhere. This leads to a lack of momentum, very, very slippery in the corners, although it does soak up bumps better than it does when your rider is light. The front end's a little bit more twitchy, and it absolutely demolishes whoops. It is an animal through the whoop section. So, kind of bringing things down to a finer level, so between the 70s and the 90s, it's a really tough call, because I absolutely love 70 in Supercross everywhere except the bumps. I quite enjoy 90 outdoors. It just feels like there's a little bit of a lack of speed in there. So I think what I would like really is for the rider weight to become an option that you could change yourself in game. I imagine that would open up the doors for so many different custom setups, because not only would the bike handle completely different based on what weight you are, but then you can fine tune that again with suspension and maybe find a nice middle ground that covers everything. Annoyingly, whilst it's unrealistic, I think the 80 kg that we have in game right now as the rider setting is the best of both worlds. It does bridge that gap and kind of makes both disciplines of Supercross and Motocross both viable. So although we do have them weird funky physics, maybe that's just a thing that has to be changed in the game rather than on the rider weight side of things overall. To conclude, I would love us to be able to change rider weight ourselves. Now, again, like I said at the start of the video, this stuff only applies in testing. You cannot go online with different rider weights, but I'm not going to show you how to do it anyway, because the last thing I want is for everybody to then go and start quote-unquote cheating in testing and setting fake world records. We already have to look out for people modifying their tyres, which I don't want. I don't want to encourage people modifying their files at all. I just want the game to change in a good way. Hopefully Proposo sees this one day and he can maybe work on the rider weight and physics a little bit more than they currently are. But that'll do it from me. Let me know your thoughts down below. I would certainly be excited to see your thoughts on the weight and if it should be changed or if it should just be one stock setting in game and that's it. And if you did enjoy, please do drop a like, subscribe to the channel if you're new. I would greatly appreciate it. Have a lovely rest of the day, whatever you're up to, and I'll catch you in tomorrow's video. Peace.